Game Freak often changes or removes gameplay mechanics, whether it's major features like Mega Evolution or smaller ones like the ability in Generation 5 to register multiple items or menu shortcuts. Today's focus is on a mechanic present since the original Red and Blue Games Gift Pokémon given by NPCs, which has been implemented inconsistently across the series. These Pokémon are often unique and can be hard or impossible to find elsewhere, making them valuable. In Red and Blue, if your party is full, the gift Pokémon is sent directly to your PC, just like with wild Pokémon. It's a helpful feature that avoids needing to free space manually. However, in Gold and Silver, this feature was removed for unknown reasons, which prompted a closer look at how different games handle gift Pokémon when your party is full. In Ruby and Sapphire, trying to receive the Wynort egg in Leverage or the cast form from the Weather Institute with a full party fails, requiring manual space clearing. This felt inconsistent, so further testing continued. In Fire Red and Leaf Green, things get confusing. When trying to get the Togepi egg in the CV Islands with a full party, the game wouldn't allow it, even though those games strive to closely replicate Generation 1's mechanic. Since eggs didn't exist in Red and Blue, this might explain the discrepancy. To test non-egg gifts, a new file was started, and the Magikarp from the salesman was successfully received and sent to the PC despite a full party. This revealed that egg gifts might be treated differently, which seems illogical but is now a pattern to watch for. Generation 2 also features a gift, Egg Togepi, similarly prevents you from receiving it with a full party. Back in Ruby and Sapphire, it didn't feel right that neither the egg nor the cast form could be received with a full party, so in Emerald, both were tested again. The Wynort egg still required space, but the cast form did not, mirroring Fire Red and Leaf Green's behavior. This suggests third versions may handle gift Pokémon differently than their paired versions. Yellow matched Red and Blue's behavior, and Crystal mirrored Gold and Silver. This means each third version might need individual testing, and from Diamond and Pearl onward, the same inconsistencies will have to be investigated. To view all 26 non-shiny forms of Unown, it's important to note that a shiny form doesn't count for some reason. This is a really interesting discovery, and if it truly hasn't been reported for over 15 years since Diamond and Pearl were released, I'm honestly surprised. It doesn't seem as obscure as something like the tentacle I mentioned earlier, but if this is the first time it's being reported, it's been hidden for even longer than that tentacle. A huge thank you to my friend Mythal Monarch for discovering this and sharing it with me. I've been meaning to make a video on this topic for a while, but it kept slipping through the crack. Hey everyone, I've been getting a lot of questions seriously. A lot about that Unown video I recently uploaded. By the way, if you haven't seen it, there's a link to it in the top right corner of the video and in the description below. It'd be awesome if you checked it out. Anyway, I've been getting so many questions, and instead of responding to each comment, I thought it'd be easier to make a follow-up video addressing some frequently asked questions. That way, all the answers are in one place for anyone who visits later. So, let's dive into the questions. First, what was going on in that scene at the beginning of the video? In Ultra Sunday and Ultra Moon, if you head to Royal Avenue and find this well towards the bottom right of the map, you can interact with it. It seems to do nothing unless you have a protein in your bag. If you do, your character will clumsily drop it into the well, hitting an old man inside. He asks if the protein is yours. If you answer correctly, you get the protein back, plus an iron. If you lie and say the protein isn't yours, something else happens. You do get the protein back, but the iron is permanently missable. Next question. What's the deal with the tentacle? In Heart Gold and Soul Silver, if you talk to an NPC in the Shamwood City Pokémon Center with exactly one Pokémon in your party and no Pokémon in your PC, he will give you a tentacle for free. This is likely a soft lock prevention method, as the only way to leave Cyanwood is via Surf or Fly, but Fly is locked until after you defeat Chuck. This was either completely unknown or not widely known until 2020, 11 years after the game's release. Now, do the punctuation forms of Unown help expand the cave? Or do you need to see the letter forms specifically in both the DS games and the Switch remakes? If you have the exclamation or question mark forms of Unown, They count toward the 26 forms needed to fully expand the cave. It's interesting because you normally can't obtain these forms until after you've seen all 26 regular forms of Unown. If you've seen every shiny Unown before the non-shiny ones, does that complete the cave? Just a quick disclaimer, all the shiny Unowns in this video are hacked for testing purposes, not used competitively or claimed as legitimate. I don't expect anyone to shiny hunt 26 Unowns, but the game still recognizes them as legitimate for this test, which made it much easier. So, does seeing every shiny Unown before the non-shiny ones finish the cave? Here's the surprising part. In the DS games, shiny Unowns do count toward expanding the Ruin Maniac cave, and having all 26 shiny Unowns will fully complete the cave, even if those are the only ones you have, and there are no non-shiny Unowns. Just to clarify, there's no difference between a shiny and a non-shiny Unown in terms of expanding the cave in the DS games. The footage you see of the DS games is from Diamond and Pearl, but I also tested everything in Platinum, and the results are the same across all 3 games. In Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, however, having a full set of shiny Unowns does nothing. The Ruin Maniac cave will remain in its first stage. I expected this result during my testing, but it was still the most interesting finding. Do you like this personality? A frequently asked question is about the kid in Salamon Town who gives out seals and ball capsules. Does he accept shiny Unown Pokemon, or do you need to show him non-shiny Unown? The answer is that he will accept shiny Unown, which surprised me a little, since you would expect someone like the Ruin Maniac to be more selective. However, he's not. I assume this happens because with the kid, you have to show him a specific Pokemon, while with the Ruin Maniac, you don't need to show him anything. So, the kid system probably checks the species and form of the Pokemon, while the Ruin Maniac system just checks the Pokédex. While I can't be sure of the game's exact coding, this reasoning makes sense to me. Now, the important question everyone asks, what's your Gengar's name? For context, when I was playing Brilliant Diamond, I wanted to catch a Ghastly for my team. The first one I caught, I named Rick Ghastly, after Rick Astley. Unfortunately, it had a bad nature, so I caught another one. This time, I gave it a slightly ruder name because I was a bit frustrated with the RNG, but it also had a bad nature. So, I caught a third Ghastly and gave it an even ruder name than the second one. This one had a decent nature, so I decided to keep it, and that's how I ended up with that name. If you still have questions after watching this video, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'll try to get back to you. Shiny Pokemon are one of the most cherished things in the Pokemon games. They first appeared in the Space World 97 demo of Gold and Silver, where they were very basic and had some quirks. For instance, there was no animation when encountering a shiny Pokemon, and due to technical limitations, shiny Pokemon shared a palette with non-shiny ones, leading to less variety in their shiny colors. They were also more common in the demo than in the full game, with about a 97% chance of encountering one. When the full game was released, these oddities were fixed, but shiny Pokemon still had some interesting features. To understand why they are so unique, let's go over some basics. First, how does the game decide if a Pokemon is shiny? Well, this process changed after Generation 2. From Generation 3 onward, whether a Pokemon is shiny or not depends on the Pokemon's personality value, along with your Trainer ID and Secret ID. However, in Generation 2, shiny status was determined by the Pokemon's force, individual values. Specifically, the defense, special, and speed 4s needed to be 10, while the attack 4 had to be one of these values: 2, 3, 6, 7, 10, 11, 14, or 15. Since IVs range from 0 to 15, the odds of finding a shiny Pokemon in Generation 2 were 1 in 8,192, which stayed the same until X and Y, when the odds were improved to 1 in 4,096. Shiny Pokemon were a new addition in Generation 2, so Game Freak made sure players would notice them, perhaps because of the mandatory encounter with the shiny Gyarados in the main game. The only other instance of a forced shiny Pokemon encounter in the mainline games is in Black and White too, where multiple forced shiny Pokémon appear. In Crystal, specifically, players can obtain an egg known as the Odd Egg. As the name suggests, the Odd Egg is unusual. It can hatch into one of 7 baby Pokémon introduced in Generation 2, and there's no way to know which one you'll get. Additionally, the Odd Egg has a 50% chance of being shiny, making it the highest chance to get a shiny in any game, though this was only true for the Japanese version. There's some uncertainty about the exact odds, as the claim that the Odd Egg has a 50% chance to be shiny is marked with a citation needed on Bulbapedia. Additionally, obtaining the Odd Egg in the Japanese version of Crystal is completely different from how it works in the international version. In the Japanese version, you needed the mobile Game Boy adapter to connect your Game Boy Color to a mobile phone, which allowed you to access the mobile system GB, an early form of online connectivity for Pokémon. One feature available through this system was what might have been the first online event in the Pokémon series, where players could receive an egg ticket from the daycare man. With the egg ticket, players could visit the Pokémon Communication Center in Goldenrod City, give the ticket to the nurse, and receive the Odd Egg in return. However, since the mobile Game Boy adapter was only available in Japan, players outside the country couldn't access the mobile system GB, making the egg event impossible unless they played the international versions of Pokémon Crystal. In those versions, the Odd Egg was made available without needing the egg ticket. This is likely the only instance in a Pokémon game where an event exclusive to Japan was included in the international versions without requiring a special event. Additionally, in the international versions, the Odd Egg has a 14% chance of hatching a shiny Pokémon compared to the 50% chance rumored for the Japanese version. However, the chance of getting any of the 7 possible Pokémon from the egg is not equal. Cleffa and Igglybuff are the most common shiny Pokémon, while Pichu and Tyrogue are the rarest. Now, turning to shiny Pokémon and eggs, breeding for shiny Pokémon in Gen 2 was more complicated than in later generations. While breeding for shiny Pokémon is always a possibility in each generation, in Gen 2, it was tied directly to the Pokémon's fours, making the process more challenging. The IVs of the parents determined whether a Pokémon would hatch shiny, so not every pairing of Pokémon could produce a shiny offspring. However, it wasn't impossible if approached correctly. When 2 Pokémon are in the daycare together, a random attack IV is generated first, which determines the Pokémon's gender. Then, the defense and special IVs are inherited from the opposite gender parent. The special stat has a 50% chance of being inherited as is, or being modified by a small amount. The speed stat is completely random. For example, if a Gyarados and a Dragonite breed, the resulting Dratini would inherit Gyarados' IVs if female, or Dragonite's IVs if male, with a random chance for the special and speed stats. The chances of getting a shiny from this breeding process are about 1 in 128, which was much better than the 1 in 8,192 odds in later generations. Although the shiny odds in Gen 2 were better than in later generations, it still took careful planning to breed a shiny Pokémon. Some players may wonder why they can't just breed 2 shiny Pokémon together to increase their chances of getting a shiny offspring, but that doesn't work as expected in Gen 2, and the process remains complex. In Generation 2 of Pokémon, some creatures might seem full of energy and look directly at you, but they won't lay an egg. This is because, unlike later generations, Gen 2 doesn't encourage inbreeding. If 2 Pokémon share the same defensive and special stats, the game assumes they are related, even if the special stat differs by 8 points. However, there are ways to decrease the odds of encountering a shiny Pokémon, lowering the chances to 1 in 64. For example, if a female Pokémon with a 100% female ratio is bred with a male shiny Pokémon, or if a male Pokémon with a 100% male ratio is bred with a female shiny, you can avoid concerns about gender. Ditto is useful for this trick, as the offspring will inherit Ditto's stats, regardless of gender. These special Dittos are known as Shiny 4 Dittos. By ensuring Ditto has a defense stat of 10 and a special stat of either 2 or 10, the breeding will result in a 1 in 64 shiny chance for each egg. Early on in the game, shiny Pokémon had some interesting methods for creating differently colored versions which was thanks to Professor X's explanation. If you want to explore more about shiny Pokémon, be sure to check out Professor X's channel. Also, there's the Arbor Week 2023 charity event, where streamers hunt for tree-themed Pokémon while raising funds for the Rainforest Trust, an organization that works to protect rainforests and their wildlife. More details are available in the description. But back to shiny Pokémon in Gen 2. While we've covered how to get them, let's dive into the shiny Pokémon themselves. Think of a shiny Charizard, and you probably picture the iconic black version. The same goes for shiny Galarian Ponyta and shiny Suicune, but they weren't always like that. Many Pokémon had significant color changes between Gen 2 and Gen 3. For example, Electrode's shiny form in Gen 2 looks different from its regular form in Gen 3, and the shiny Machop has a completely altered appearance. 2. Machoke and Machamp also underwent changes in Gen 3, with their non-shiny forms looking different than in Gen 2, while the shiny forms only saw slight modifications. These changes became more pronounced in Gen 4. Gen 2 wasn't the only generation with different shiny colors, but it had the most drastic changes. For example, Blastoise had the same shell and body color in Gen 2, but in Gen 3, they were distinct colors for both shiny and regular forms. The limitations of color palettes in Gen 2 also affected some Pokémon, such as the Cyndaquil line, where the back was black with orange highlights due to the limitations of available colors. In Gen 3, however, the back received a blue color, and the shiny version would change both the back and the body color, keeping the flames the same something impossible in Gen 2. One last curious detail about shiny Pokémon in Gen 2 involves the unique Pokémon Unown. In Gen 2, Unown had 26 different forms, each corresponding to a letter of the alphabet. The form of an Unown was determined by its IVs, which also determined if it was shiny. As a result, only certain forms of Unown could be shiny. In Generation 2, certain Pokémon have a gender ratio of 7 males to 1 female, which affects their shiny status. For instance, starter Pokémon have this gender ratio, making it 7 times more likely to get a male starter than a female one. If you happen to get a female starter, it will have an attack IV of either 0 or 1, meaning its attack stat will be the lowest or second lowest. Interestingly, shiny Pokémon with this gender ratio can only be male, since a shiny Pokémon requires an attack IV of at least 2, but females with this ratio can't have an attack IV higher than 1. This means female shiny Pokémon cannot exist in this group. Most Pokémon with this gender ratio are starters or fossil Pokémon, with exceptions like Togepi and Snorlax. Starting from later generations, however, IVs no longer determine whether a Pokémon is shiny or its gender. There are also glitches related to shiny Pokémon, such as one that turns any wild Ditto into a shiny, but these are less relevant than the intended mechanics. Pokémon Colosseum is unique in that it features RPG gameplay similar to the main series, but without staples like the Pokédex or gym badges, and it was developed by a team that had little Pokémon experience. This lack of expertise might explain a glitch that allows poison Pokémon in the game to behave unusually. In earlier generations, if a Pokémon was poisoned, it would take damage as you walked, and could faint if its HP reached 0 from poison. In Generation 4, poison was no longer lethal in the overworld, and by Generation 5, Pokémon didn't take damage from poison at all while walking. In Pokémon Colosseum, a Gen 3 game, poisoned Pokémon will take damage as you walk, and if they faint, they can be revived with an item like a revive. However, the issue arises when a poisoned Pokémon faints from poison damage in the overworld. Using a revive on them doesn't heal the poison status, which is unusual. Despite this, if a Pokémon faints due to poison damage in battle, a revive will restore them without the poison status. So, revives only fail to remove poison when the Pokémon faints due to poison damage while walking around, not in battle. The next question was whether any other status conditions are glitched, and the answer appears to be no. Not all were tested like freeze, but it's likely that poison is the only one causing this issue, as it's the only status that can lead to a faint outside of battle. It seems there's something in the game's code that doesn't clear a Pokémon's status if they faint outside of battle. For the record, All tests were done on both shadow and non-shadow Pokémon, and the results were the same in both cases. As for whether the glitch appears in Pokémon XD, the sequel to Colosseum, the answer is Noit was apparently fixed in that game. When testing it by poisoning a Pokémon and reviving it after it fainted outside of battle, the poison status was gone. This was a shorter topic, but that's the main point. Any further questions can be asked in the comments. There's a strange glitch in Pokémon Ruby, Sapphire, Fire Red, and Leaf Green that most fans don't seem to know about. This explanation covers what the glitch is, how it works, how to trigger it, and how it remained hidden for over 20 years. It's a bit complex, but the goal is to explain it clearly and thoroughly. To understand the full story, we go back to early 2008 when a GameFAQ user described a strange encounter during a battle with Lieutenant Surge. Their Nidoking was paralyzed by Surge's Raichu, which was normal due to static. But later, Nidoking's double kick somehow caused Raichu to become paralyzed. This was odd because Poison Point, which Nidoking had, is supposed to poison, not paralyze, and only triggers when the opponent makes contact. Also, double kick doesn't have any secondary effect and has a 0% chance to cause one. No one could explain it, and since there was no visual evidence, many likely dismissed it. Nothing else surfaced for years until recently, when a Twitch streamer encountered a similar situation during a Leaf Green speedrun. A Nidoran used double kick on a Pikachu, which then became paralyzed. This mirrored the 2008 report. The clip reached the Glitch City Research Institute Discord, where the original GameFAQs post was revisited. A tool-assisted speedrunner claimed to have run over 10,000 simulations of the scenario, successfully reproducing the glitch multiple times, confirming its legitimacy. Others then began testing the glitch further. They verified that Poison Point, not just static, could also trigger the glitch under specific conditions in Ruby. Modifications were made to test this, such as giving Mudkip Poison Point and Torchic Double Kick. This was done in Ruby because the glitch was found to be fixed in Emerald. It was also confirmed that Triple Kick and moves related to attraction, like Cute Charm, don't activate the glitch. A different type of status condition than paralysis or poison, along with the unique way Cute Charm works, is an interesting discovery. Another noteworthy finding that seems unrelated at first is that abilities like static do not check if the opponent is already affected by a status condition. Of course, you cannot have multiple status conditions or the same one twice. This means that if abilities like static or poison point activate when you already have a status condition, they do nothing. However, they still activate, which is important. But to understand why, we have to look at a previous study's tasks. In their research with over 10,000 trials, they found an interesting statistic. When static triggered on the first hit of double kick, Pikachu was paralyzed only about a third of the time, compared to when static triggered on the second hit. This seems odd. Why would it matter which hit of double kick activates an ability like static? To answer this, we need to dig into the game's code and understand when the game checks for secondary effects. For most moves, this check occurs before the game checks whether an ability like static will activate, as long as the move makes contact. For example, if you use Thunder Punch and pass the check for paralysis with static and for burn with flame body, Thunder Punch will first paralyze and then burn the opponent. But with multi-hit moves like double kick, the secondary effect is checked after the ability triggers. In other words, the order of checks is reversed. Normally, this doesn't matter, since the only multi-hit move with a secondary effect in Gen 3 is Twin Needle, which doesn't make contact. However, this small change in how the game checks for secondary effects becomes crucial in this case. Going back to the original task, when static triggered on the first hit of Naran's double kick, Pikachu was paralyzed only a third of the time compared to when it triggered on the second hit. This is because of how abilities like static work in Gen 3. Instead of simply inflicting paralysis or burn, they temporarily add a secondary effect to your attack, which causes the attacker to get paralyzed, burned, etc. This effect is supposed to disappear the next time an attack occurs. But remember, any secondary effect of a multi-hit move activates after the opponent's ability triggers. So, if static activates while using double kick, it gives double kick the ability to inflict paralysis, but only for that hit. If static activates on the first hit, the second hit won't have the chance to paralyze unless it also activates static. Additionally, in the game's code, multi-hit moves other than Twin Needle have a 0% chance of a secondary effect, so even if double kick gains the ability to cause paralysis, it won't actually happen due to the 0% chance. Now, here's the kicker. In Ruby, Sapphire, Fire Red, and Leaf Green, Game Freak made a slight error in their code. The game pulls a random number between 0 and 99 to determine if a secondary effect activates, comparing that number to the chance for the effect to happen. The correct code, as seen in Emerald, would only allow the effect to happen if the random number is less than the percent chance. But in Ruby, Sapphire, Fire Red, and Leaf Green, the code checks if the number is less than or equal to the chance. So, even with a 0% chance, the effect could still trigger if the random number pulled is 0. Moves that have a 0% chance to trigger a secondary effect, like multi-hit moves such as double kick, should have no secondary effect. However, multi-hit moves gain a secondary effect when abilities like static or poison point activate. This makes the 0% chance turn into a 1% chance. This bug, though bizarre, doesn't fully explain why the results varied so much depending on which hit of double kick triggered static. The glitch works only when the first hit activates a static effect, and the Twin Needle's poison effect is only triggered by its second and final hit. This limitation also applies to multi-hit moves like double kick that can induce paralysis and poison. Essentially, a status condition can only occur if an ability such as static or poison point triggers during the final hit of a move like double kick. Additionally, static and similar abilities can still activate even if the Pokémon is already affected by a status condition. The noticeable difference occurs when the first hit of double kick triggers static, requiring the second hit to also trigger it for Pikachu to become paralyzed. After further testing, researchers couldn't replicate the glitch with moves like double slap, which, despite its name, is a different multi-hit move. Flame Body and Effect Spore were never directly tested, but based on the game's code, they were likely to trigger the glitch. There was also an unanswered question about whether a link battle between Emerald and a game with this glitch could desynchronize. In summary, the research led by a speedrunner and shared in a Game Frequently Asked Questions forum helped uncover that static and poison point could cause double kick to inflict paralysis or poison on the respective Pokémon, provided that the Pokémon with poison point isn't of the poison type, as they would be immune. This glitch is made possible by a coding error in the game, which accidentally gives a secondary effect that would otherwise have a 0% chance of triggering a 1% chance to happen. A few weeks later, a video was uploaded showcasing the glitch, where it was noticed that the paralysis text displayed when Pikachu was affected was different from the usual. This led to further investigation by the Glitch City Research Institute Discord members, who provided additional insights. A lot of what is known now came from the combined efforts of users like Chickasaurus, GL, and Blay, who informed the researcher and helped gather more data. Moving forward, the researcher aimed to answer some unresolved questions, such as whether Flame Body and Effect Spore triggered the glitch, and whether multi-hit moves like Double Slap and Arm Thrust could activate it. They also sought to test if the glitch could desync a link battle with a copy of Emerald, and whether it appeared in Pokémon Colosseum or XD. To test this, a modified copy of Pokémon Ruby was created with a Slugma and a Shroomish for Flame Body and Effect Spore testing. They also made changes to the moves and stats of the Pokémon involved to optimize testing conditions. After a while, the glitch was triggered with Arm Thrust and Flame Body, suggesting that moves like Double Kick weren't necessary for it to work, and that moves like Double Slap and Fury Attack could also cause the glitch. Interestingly, no ability text appeared when Slugma's ability was activated. Game Freak has a habit of removing or changing game mechanics, whether it's major changes like getting rid of Mega Evolution, or smaller features like how Generation 5 allowed multiple registered items and menu shortcuts. Today's focus is on a mechanic that's been around since the original Red and Blue games, but has been surprisingly inconsistent over the years: gift Pokémon. These are Pokémon given to the player by NPCs, often rare or unavailable elsewhere in the game. In Red and Blue, if your party is full when you receive a gift Pokémon, it still gets sent to your PC, just like when you catch a wild Pokémon. It's a convenient feature since you don't have to make space manually. Gold and Silver, however, remove this function. You're required to have space in your party to receive the gift, a seemingly unnecessary downgrade. Curious about how this feature behaves in later games, the investigation continues with Ruby and Sapphire. The first gift is the Why Not Egg in Laveridge. With a full party, you can't receive it. To check if this was just how eggs were handled, the cast form from the Weather Institute was tested under the same condition, and again, you're required to free a slot. Fire Red and Leaf Green handle things inconsistently. Trying to receive the Togepi egg with a full party results in an error. This is odd since these games try hard to replicate Gen 1 mechanics, right down to blocking evolutions of certain Pokémon until the national dex is obtained. But because eggs didn't exist in Gen 1, it might be a special case. To clarify, a new file was started and the Magikarp gift was tested with a full party. It worked and went straight to the PC. So gift eggs and regular gift Pokémon are handled differently, which is confusing. Back to the Gen 2. Togepi egg is consistent with requiring party space for eggs. This suggests eggs are generally treated differently than non-egg gifts. In Ruby and Sapphire, neither the Why Not Egg nor cast form could be received with a full party. But in Emerald, while the Why Not Egg still required space, cast form didn't. It was sent to the PC. This mirrors Fire Red and Leaf Green and sets a pattern where third versions in a generation handle gift Pokémon differently than the originals. Yellow behaves the same as Red and Blue. Crystal is consistent with Gold and Silver. Now, it seems necessary to test all the third versions and see how each one treats gift Pokémon, especially as the complexity increases in later generations like Diamond and Pearl. Game Freak frequently alters or removes game mechanics, whether it's major changes like eliminating Mega Evolution or minor tweaks such as the ability to register multiple items in Gen 5 or certain menus in later games. Today, we're going to discuss a feature that has been in the Pokémon games since the original Red and Blue, but has been handled inconsistently to the point that I find it interesting. In every Pokémon game, there are NPCs who give you Pokémon, often referred to as gift Pokémon. These Pokémon can be rare or hard to find elsewhere in the game, so they can be valuable. In Red and Blue, if you receive one and your party is full, the gift Pokémon will be sent to your PC, much like a wild Pokémon caught when your party is full. This was a nice quality of life feature, as it meant you didn't have to visit a Pokémon Center to make room for a new Pokémon. However, when Game Freak released Gold and Silver, they decided to remove this feature. If your party was full in those games, you couldn't receive a gift Pokémon, which was a bit frustrating but not a huge issue. I was curious about which games still allowed players to receive gift Pokémon with a full party, and it turns out the answer is more complicated than expected. Starting with Ruby and Sapphire, the first gift Pokémon you can receive is the Why Not Egg from Lava Ridge. If your party is full, you won't be able to get it. I also tested trying to get cast form from the Weather Institute with a full party, and again, the game wouldn't allow it, asking me to free up space in my party. In Fire Red and Leaf Green, things get even more confusing. I tested the games on a Leaf Green save, right near the Togepi egg on the CVI Islands. I was told my party was full, even though I expected that you could receive gift Pokémon with a full party in these games. Fire Red and Leaf Green were designed to closely follow the original Red and Blue games, so it felt strange that they'd changed this mechanic. I then started a new file, played up to the point where you can get the Magikarp from the salesman, and confirmed that it would be sent to my PC if my party was full. This suggests that gift eggs and non-egg gifts were handled differently, which was frustrating but not entirely unexpected. The second generation games, like Gold and Silver, feature a gift Pokémon obtained as an egg, the Togepi egg. It would seem odd if you couldn't receive a gift with a full party, especially since it was an egg, and indeed, that's how it worked. Moving back to Ruby and Sapphire, I felt something was off about the way gift Pokémon were handled, so I tested both the Win Not egg and cast form in Emerald. While I couldn't get the Why Not egg with a full party, I could get cast form, which was different from how it worked in Ruby and Sapphire, but similar to how it worked in Fire Red and Leaf Green. This pattern of differences between the first two games and the third version in each generation became clear, leading me to check all the other third versions. Yellow worked the same as Red and Blue, and Crystal worked the same as Gold and Silver, but now I had to check all the other third versions moving forward. The next step was checking Diamond and Pearl for any differences. The Eevee that the baby gives you is unavailable until after the main game. Trying to get it with a full party will result in the baby saying she can't give it to you, which is a strange change compared to Fire, Red, Leaf Green, and Emerald, where you could get the Eevee. In Heart Gold and Soul Silver, a hiker offers players a Happiny egg, but once again, it's not possible to receive it with a full party. Platinum follows the same rules as Diamond and Pearl, meaning no gift Pokémon can be obtained if your party is full. Heart Gold and Soul Silver follow the same limitations as Gold, Silver, and Crystal, where no gift Pokémon are given if the party is full. This becomes even more frustrating if you try to enter a password for eggs that Primo gives you and have a full party, as you'll need to give the full password again to receive the egg. In Black and White, to the west of Route 1, there is an egg gift Pokémon, but again, you can't get it with a full party. Other gift Pokémon, like members of the legendary trio, are also unobtainable with a full party. The sequels, Black 2 and White 2, follow the same mechanics. Things get a bit strange in X and Y, where the first gift Pokémon after your starter is one of the Kanto starters, given by Professor Sycamore. If you try to get it with a full party, you'll be forced to send a Pokémon to the PC to make room. I thought this was a one-off, but when I revived a fossil, the Pokémon also went to the PC if I had a full party. This is the first time this happened since Emerald, so it seems like a quality of life feature was brought back. However, there are no gift Pokémon given as eggs in X and Y, and using the daycare is no substitute. You can't get an egg with a full party. It's unfortunate, but not unexpected. In Omega, Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire, they required an empty slot for you to receive a gift Pokémon, just like in the original Ruby and Sapphire. However, after the 5th gym, when you receive Latios or Latias, it works similarly to the Kanto starter in X and Y. If you have a full party, you'll be asked to send a Pokémon to your PC. This could be a coincidence that both the Kanto starter and the Eon duo require space in your party to make room, or a strange programming quirk. While revisiting Omega Ruby, I revived the root fossil, but instead of being told to make room, it went straight to my PC. This is odd, as it's not how gift Pokémon usually work in Omega, Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire, and it's different from the original Ruby and Sapphire. Now, fossils behave differently than other gift Pokémon in some games. The first 5 generations treated fossils like other gift Pokémon, but Gen 6, specifically X and Y, does it differently. I tested this by getting Lucario, and just like the Kanto starters, if you try to get it with a full party, you're asked to send a Pokémon to the PC. The final gift Pokémon in these games is Lapras, located next to Lucario, and it also can't be received with a full party. This seems to be the general rule for gift Pokémon in X and Y. I can't yet confirm the mechanics for the Switch games, but I assume fossils work like other gift Pokémon in those games. Gen 6 appears to be the odd one out when it comes to fossils. As for Sunday and Moon, they introduced a nice quality of life improvement. When you catch a wild Pokémon while your party is full, you're able to send a Pokémon from your party to your boxes to make space for the new catch, or simply send it to the PC boxes. This also applies to receiving gift Pokémon. Thanks to this, Sunday and Moon are the first games that let you receive an egg with a full party, which took 7 generations to happen. Ultra Sunday and Ultra Moon follow the same mechanics as Sunday and Moon. However, when I loaded my Ultra Sunday save file and claimed multiple mystery gifts, I discovered that if your party is full, you can't receive a Pokémon from the mystery gift. Game Freak included a feature to avoid this, but somehow, it still happened. Now, it seems I'll need to inject mystery gifts into every Pokémon game to see what happens when I try to claim them with a full party. since this has now become inconsistent. I tested the DS and 3 Deciseconds games, and none allow you to receive mystery gifts with a full party. My guess is that the Switch games might allow it, but I'm unsure. If anyone knows how the Switch or the first 3 generations handle this, let me know. In Let's Go, a remake of Yellow, you can collect gift Pokémon with a full party, but there are no gift eggs to test. In Sword and Shield, even though there's no egg gift, we can still get eggs using the daycare, like in X and Y, and you can receive an egg with a full party. Pokémon Legends, Arceus has no eggs either, but you can collect all gifts with a full party. It seems Game Freak has been getting it right in recent games. Similarly, Scarlet and Violet also allow you to collect both non-egg gifts like Galarian Meowth from Salvatore, and egg gifts like the random sea starter from Jack, even with a full party. As for Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, although they are remakes of Diamond and Pearl, they don't handle gift Pokémon the same way as the originals. I spoke to Babby with a full party and was able to get Eevee, unlike the original games. However, I couldn't get the Happiny Egg with a full party, as you need to free up a slot for it. Why? If they had just kept the original rule requiring an empty slot for all gift Pokémon, I would have understood, but they didn't. The decision seems inconsistent, especially after all the improvements in later games. It's interesting how inconsistent Game Freak was in handling these things over the years, and it took 7 generations for them to finally get it right, alongside other features, like the way Generation 3 games handled mystery gifts. I recently made a video about how Generation 3 games had some unique NPCs, including a tutor in Pokémon XD who could teach 100 moves, but only to Mew. You couldn't choose which moves were taught, as the tutor would present 4 moves after a series of questions. 6 of those moves were unique to Mew at the time, adding an extra appeal to the tutor. It cost 5,000 to use this service. Is this conversation helpful so far? After answering the questions, the game selects a category based on the results, and, if applicable, a subcategory, then a template. For example, if strategy and risk have the same points, and both are higher than attack, the game will choose a template from the defensive category. Within this category, there's a 70% chance of getting a template from the first subcategory and a 30% chance for the second subcategory, which includes a template that gives Fake Out to Mew. Each template has an equal chance of being selected once the category and subcategory are determined. If, for example, the reliable category is picked, there's a 25% chance for any given template to be selected. If the second subcategory of the risky category is chosen, there's a 50% chance for either of the templates to be selected. At this stage, you might wonder how the move slots, particularly the non-fixed attacks, get filled. The fourth parameter, Seed, plays a role here as an RNG element, influencing non-fixed moves. However, it's not something you can directly manipulate, so it's not a major focus. The more significant factor is the labels next to the fixed attacks, like consistent or offensive. These labels are assigned to the 94 non-exclusive moves the tutor can teach Mew. Once a template is selected, the game looks at the list of non-exclusive moves and selects the appropriate number based on the flags attached to them. For example, if a template contains Feint Attack in the first slot, moves in the third and fourth slots will have the consistent flag. The flags serve different purposes. Physical and special flags are straightforward, referring to physical and special attacks, respectively. Offensive refers to moves with either physical or special flags, and should not be confused with the offensive category, which is separate. Consistent flags are for moves with 100% accuracy, or that ignore evasion and don't have drawbacks like recoil or stat drops. Inconsistent is the opposite, referring to moves with less than 100% accuracy, or with drawbacks, as well as situational moves like Mimic, Roar, and Transform. Moves with no flag are considered inconsistent, unless they have a consistent flag. The punch flag applies to moves with punch in their name, like Fire Punch or Mega Punch. You can find a complete list of flags in a linked Google Doc. If a move has no flag, it will only appear in templates that require inconsistent moves or those that allow any move. To summarize, after answering the tutor's questions, points are added or subtracted from 3 values, and a template is selected. This template will either offer some of the moves the tutor can teach, or, rarely, none or all of them. Any remaining moves are selected from Mew's available moves in Generation 3 games, including TMs, HMs, move tutors, and level up moves. The tutor can teach Mew 6 exclusive moves, but only 1 can be on Mew's move set at a time. While later Pokemon games have allowed Mew to learn some of these exclusive moves, like Roleplay and Nightshade, this information was mostly discovered through research on Pokémon XD, which was released in 2005. The code was complex and difficult to decipher, so there may be errors or missing information. The findings are accurate, but new information or corrections will be added to the Google Doc as discoveries are made. A big thank you goes to contributors like Stars, Lorak from Smogon Forums, and YouTuber Collector Tagami, who helped with this research. After answering the questions, depending on the results, the game will choose a category, then a subcategory, if applicable, and finally a template. For example, if strategy and risk have the same number of points and are both higher than attack, the game will select a template from the defensive category. In this case, there's a 70% chance of choosing a template from the first subcategory and a 30% chance from the second subcategory. Each template has an equal chance of being selected once the category and subcategory, if applicable, are determined. If the reliable category is selected, there is a 25% chance of picking any given template. For the second subcategory of the risky category, there is a 50% chance of selecting either template. As for the move slots that aren't fixed attacks, 2 factors influence how they are filled. The first is a parameter called seed, which works similarly to a random number generator, RNG, to help determine these moves, although it cannot be directly controlled. The second factor is the flags assigned to the 94 non-exclusive moves that the tutor can teach. After a template is chosen, the game looks at the list of non-exclusive moves and selects the appropriate number of moves based on their flags. Flags are labels assigned to moves, like consistent or offensive. These labels indicate the type of move, such as physical or special, and can influence which moves are selected. For instance, consistent moves are those with 100% accuracy and no drawbacks, like recoil or stat drops, while inconsistent moves have less than 100% accuracy or come with negative effects. Some moves, like Mimic or Roar, are considered inconsistent because they have situational uses. Punch flags refer to moves with punch in their names, like Fire Punch or Dynamic Punch. If a move has no flag, it will only appear in templates that call for inconsistent moves or any type of move. To summarize, after you answer the tutor's questions, points are added or subtracted to 3 values which influence the category, subcategory, and template selection. The chosen template determines which moves the tutor will offer, and in rare cases, all or none of the moves may be selected. Any remaining moves are chosen from a list of available moves that Mew can learn in Generation 3 games. Mew can learn 6 exclusive moves from the tutor, but only 1 can be in its move set at a time. Although testing matches the findings, the code for this system is complex, and there might be some errors or missing information. While the results seem accurate, some details might have been overlooked. If you find any errors or new information, please contribute, and the linked Google Doc will be updated accordingly. Pokémon XD, released in 2005, has taken nearly 20 years to fully understand how the Mew tutor system works. The research process and findings were exciting, with contributions from various members and individuals. The research conducted and a video from a collector showcasing the Mew tutor helped give me a bit of a head start in my investigation before I contacted Stars. I hope I explained this clearly, but if you have any questions about what was discussed, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll do my best to respond. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. A big thank you to all my patrons, including Darkmaster Zork, Mythal Monarch, SZ, Dunanix, and everyone else featured on the screen for their generous support of the channel.